Hello. Today General Hospital will Erica's return to the daytime television landscape is far more than a nostalgic celebration of a soap opera legend. It represents a seismic opportunity to redefine the narrative terrain of General Hospital and redraw the power dynamics of Port Charles using the legacy she so powerfully etched into the hearts of audiences during her storied decades as Viki in One Life to Live. For longtime viewers who walked with her through the most tumultuous chapters of Landview's emotional chronicles, Erica wasn't just an actress with 6 Daytime Emmy Awards, she was the embodiment of transformation, resilience, and enduring strength. Viki's journey from a fragile, conflicted woman to a steadfast pillar of moral clarity and emotional grace was nothing short of legendary. So even the mere whisper of Erica's possible return, be it a subtle comment during a fan convention, a nostalgic photograph, or a soft glance acknowledging loyal fans, was enough to set the soap community ablaze with anticipation and wonder. The notion of a One Life to Live and General Hospital crossover has flickered in the background for years, most notably through Blair's appearances in Port Charles, but never before has it been so tantalizingly close to a defining, canonical moment as it is with Erica's potential involvement. Viki is not just a character, she is a legacy, one forged through layers of personal trauma, familial betrayal, political corruption, and profound personal growth. She has battled dissociative identity disorder, taken on the patriarchy, and governed with wisdom and compassion. If Erica were to step into Port Charles, whether as Viki or as a wholly original character molded by her gravitas, it would mark a historic convergence of 2 soap universes, potentially ushering in a new golden age for General Hospital storytelling. At a time when Port Charles is entangled in fierce custody battles, murky inheritance disputes, and the fraying threads of dynastic power within the Quartermaine and Cassadine families, the arrival of someone with Viki's emotional depth and moral conviction could serve as a divine disruptor, a stabilizing force in the midst of chaos. Her presence alone could illuminate hidden truths, challenge corrupt motives, and elevate the moral stakes for characters who have long blurred the lines between justice and vengeance. If Erica returns as Viki, her integration into Port Charles could take the form of a legal consultant or a trusted ally called upon to guide characters like Carly or Michael through emotionally fraught dilemmas. Viki's past as a beacon of empathy and rationality would make her a natural mentor, a compassionate mirror held up to the faces of those spiraling into revenge or manipulation, such as Drew, whose recent schemes have drawn the ire of fans, or Nina, whose moral compass has become increasingly erratic. Viki's mere presence could prompt reflection, redemption, or even confrontation, depending on the darkness of the character she encounters. However, the more radical and narratively rich choice would be for Erica to debut as a brand new character, perhaps a renowned attorney from New York who arrives under the pretext of conducting an audit on questionable philanthropic foundations tied to deception or the financial web of ELQ. Her investigation could lead to the unearthing of past embezzlement or cover-ups orchestrated by Martin, potentially implicating Blair once again and linking back to Tracy's historical entanglements in corporate power plays. This would position Erica's character as both an exposer of truth and a harbinger of reckoning, someone who forces long-silent secrets to the surface and demands accountability from Port Charles's most formidable players. The narrative opportunities here are boundless. If Erica's character were to find herself at odds with Tracy over the rightful guardianship of Geo, the stakes would immediately skyrocket. Tracy, whose reputation as a cunning and manipulative matriarch remains unchallenged, would meet her match in a woman equally sharp, but guided by integrity rather than self-interest. A courtroom showdown between the two could rival any corporate war in GH history. Not only over the future of a child, but over what kind of legacy the Quartermaines intend to uphold. Simultaneously, Erica's character could cross paths with Alexis Davis, perhaps through a shared Cassadine ancestry that neither woman knew existed. Imagine the revelation that Erica is the long-lost daughter of Mikos, or an heir to a trust fund long thought sealed. The collision of their legal minds, complicated by emotional revelations, could reinvigorate Alexis' character arc and restore her relevance to both the courtroom and the Cassadine saga. Through this dynamic, Erica would not just be involved in surface-level drama, she would be anchoring the deepest veins of GH history, transforming them in real time. In a different scenario, Erica could play a former federal investigator now turned advocate for abused women and children, whose past entanglements with Sonny's criminal empire resurface just as he attempts to reclaim moral authority within the town. Erica's character, perhaps a widowed judge whose life was torn apart by mob violence, could become both an adversary and a reluctant ally, pushing Sonny to examine the consequences of his legacy. Their conversations wouldn't be action-packed, but they would be explosive in their emotional weight. The kind of verbal duels where ideology, guilt, and forgiveness hang in the balance. Her arrival could also touch characters like Sasha, who has endured devastating trauma and loss, by offering an example of a woman who overcame darkness not by destroying it, but by transcending it. For Brooke Lynn, Erica might represent the kind of bold, principled woman she strives to become, someone whose authority is earned through patience and strength. Even Ava, known for her ruthlessness and elegance, could find herself unsettled by Erica's quiet command, sparking a rivalry of restraint versus seduction, of principle versus pragmatism. But beyond the characters she might directly influence, Erica's true power lies in what she symbolizes. In an era where storylines often teeter on sensationalism, her return could restore balance, not by rejecting drama, but by giving it deeper roots. Her character could remind both the audience and the writers that the most powerful stories aren't always the loudest, but the ones where characters confront their truths, grapple with their pasts, and choose to grow rather than dominate. That, above all, is what Viki always stood for, and what Erica carries effortlessly into any role she inhabits. So whether she returns to General Hospital as the venerable Viki Lord or as a new character sculpted from decades of performance mastery, Erica's re-entry into daytime is no mere cameo. It is the promise of legacy meeting reinvention, of nostalgia fusing with narrative relevance. It is the possibility of a new axis forming within Port Charles, one grounded in history, tempered by grace, and ablaze with potential. With her presence, GH doesn't just revisit its past, it redefines its future. In an intricate and deeply layered alternate storyline, Erica could be reintroduced to the world of General Hospital as a secret half-sister of the Cassadine family, a daughter of Miko's Cassadine, born from an affair that was intentionally hidden from public and private knowledge to preserve the illusion of Cassadine prestige. For years, this woman, cloaked in obscurity, banished from the opulence of Windmere, has existed outside the watchful eye of the notoriously paranoid Cassadine patriarchs. Her life, shaped in the shadows of one of soap opera's most malevolent dynasties, has been marked by quiet survival, patient observation, and the meticulous gathering of evidence that now, decades later, gives her the power to shatter generations of lies. Her arrival in Port Charles would not be dramatic in the traditional sense. No explosions, no shouting matches. Only a subtle appearance in a courthouse lobby, a quiet conversation with a clerk, a document sliding across a table. But the ripples of her presence would be seismic. Erica's character would hold a sealed inheritance from Helena Cassadine, a final directive, cruel and controlling even from beyond the grave, that ensures one last secret cannot remain buried. The inheritance includes not only substantial unclaimed assets, but also a legal dossier outlining inheritance structures, updated DNA evidence, and proof of her own lineage. None of it had ever been disclosed to Alexis or any known Cassadine heirs, as Helena saw to it that this final chapter of her will would only activate when Erica chose to reveal herself, not a moment sooner. This revelation would send shockwaves through the Cassadine family. Alexis, long tormented by her tangled identity as a Cassadine and her constant attempts to escape the toxicity of that bloodline, would now be confronted with a sister, one who had been rejected more cruelly and thoroughly than even she had been. The emotional implications of such a discovery would pierce Alexis' carefully maintained emotional armor. For someone who spent decades reconciling her past and building a career around truth and justice, learning that her own father left behind yet another daughter, one hidden not by fate but by deliberate design, would bring both guilt and disbelief. The power dynamics between Erica and Alexis would be deeply compelling, one woman having lived a life denied, the other one surviving within the chaos, each with their own view of what family and legacy mean. But the drama wouldn't end with personal reckonings. Spencer, always grappling with the pressure of Cassadine expectations and the legacy of Nicholas and Victor, would be confronted with the possibility that he is no longer the sole moral compass or heir of his generation. Erica's character, if revealed to be Helena's last intended heir, could bring with her not just money and documents, but legitimacy. The kind that forces Spencer to reevaluate everything he believed about entitlement, power, and heritage. Likewise, Christina, fiercely independent yet deeply connected to her Cassadine blood through Alexis, would be drawn into the emotional storm, finding in Erica either a role model of strength or a mirror of the familial abandonment she, too, has experienced. Even more stunning would be Erica's possession of materials that could directly impact current legal battles. Namely, the high-stakes custody case between Michael and Drew. Unbeknownst to most of Port Charles, Erica's files contain medical records and signed statements that reveal Drew's involvement in manipulating DNA test results concerning Daisy, the newborn child allegedly rejected by Michael. The evidence implicates Drew in a scheme to falsify test results not only for Daisy but potentially for Wiley as well, casting doubt on Michael's supposed intentions and shaking the foundation of his parental rights. The implications of these documents would be catastrophic. Not only would Drew face legal ruin and public disgrace, but the Corinthos and Quartermain legacies themselves could splinter under the weight of the deception. And Erica, bound by a quiet sense of justice forged from a lifetime of watching from the outside, would be the key to unlocking these truths. She would not wield her information for vengeance but for accountability. Her choice to step forward would be measured, moral, and deliberate, a move not to destroy lives, but to set right the imbalance that has long defined Port Charles. Her character could become the ethical foil to Drew's manipulation, the voice of conscience the courts need in a town where justice is often blurred by family name and influence. But Erica's impact wouldn't be confined to the legal system or the Cassadine legacy. A second, equally explosive twist would unfold if Erica were revealed to be the chosen legal guardian of Geo, secretly appointed before death by Edward or Lila Quartermain. This development would immediately reignite dormant conflicts within the Quartermain family. Tracy, cunning and fiercely territorial, would see Erica not as a neutral figure but as a threat, an outsider suddenly wielding influence over the grandson she has tried to mold, protect, and ultimately control. A battle would ensue, not just in courtrooms, but in subtle maneuvers of power, manipulation, and strategic alliances. Erica, intelligent and unshakable, would counter every veiled insult and strategic threat from Tracy with dignity, poise, and legal precision. The drama would stretch across boardrooms and breakfast tables at the Quartermain estate, as the very notion of Joe's future becomes a tug-of-war between a woman who believes in his autonomy and a matriarch determined to shape him in the Quartermain image. The audience would witness a masterclass in character conflict. Not shouting matches, but Cold War battles of intellect and generational philosophy. Erica and Tracy would represent opposing ideologies, principle versus pragmatism, legacy versus reinvention. But Erica's sphere of influence could go even deeper, especially if her past contains connections to Port Charles's criminal underworld. Suppose, years ago, Erica served as a federal investigator or state attorney tasked with dismantling organized crime rings, one of which included Sonny Corinthos. Though Sonny might not remember her, she remembers him, not as a mobster, but as a young father standing outside a courthouse, arguing for custody of a son he barely knew. Now, with Erica back and aligned with institutions Sonny has long manipulated or defied, her presence could represent an existential threat to his empire. She doesn't have to expose him publicly. The mere implication that she could reopen long-forgotten cases or inspire new scrutiny from law enforcement would be enough to rattle even Sonny. Carly, caught in the crossfire, would find herself emotionally torn. Her loyalty to Sonny has shaped much of her adult life, but in Erica, she may recognize a woman of rare integrity, someone who doesn't operate on vendetta, but on vision. Carly might resent Erica's judgment at first, but respect would soon grow. Especially as Erica refuses to play by Port Charles's usual rules of selective morality. Erica might even push Carly to reassess her own role in enabling Sonny's actions, to ask hard questions about what legacy she's building, and what kind of protection her children truly need. All of this would culminate not in a single courtroom verdict or explosive confrontation, but in a profound restructuring of relationships and power structures throughout the entire GH canvas. Erica's character. Whether a Cassadine exile, a Quartermain trustee, or a quiet adversary of Sunny's past, would be a seismic force not because of what she says or even what she does, but because of what she represents. The long-delayed reckoning of truths buried too deep, power wielded without consequence, and families built on fault lines. She would be a living testament that history never stays buried, that power can and must be challenged, and that in Port Charles, a town built on secrets, the greatest strength lies not in domination, but in exposure. Through Erica, General Hospital could explore redemption, legacy, and moral consequence on a scale rarely seen, offering its audience not just another character, but a paradigm shift. Beyond the direct familial and legal entanglements, Erica's presence in Port Charles would send psychological shockwaves through a wide array of secondary characters, shifting emotional dynamics and personal trajectories in subtle but profound ways. Brooke Lynn, often torn between ambition and insecurity, could come to view Erica as a model of grounded strength, a woman who commands respect not through manipulation, but through quiet resilience and unwavering clarity. For someone like Brooke Lynn, who is constantly wrestling with proving her worth while honoring the Quartermain name, Erica's composed and principled demeanor could serve as a blueprint for long-term growth. Meanwhile, Sasha, still navigating the emotional wreckage of psychological abuse, addiction, and the heartbreaking loss of her child, might see in Erica a rare source of solace, a woman who not only understands mental trauma but has survived it and risen stronger. Erica's capacity for empathy, born from her own scars, would be a balm for Sasha's fractured spirit, potentially leading to a deeply maternal and healing bond. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Ava, whose world thrives on perception, power, and control, could view Erica not as an ally but as a threat. Erica's calm authority and moral steadiness could undermine Ava's carefully curated dominance, setting the stage for a simmering, cerebral rivalry between two formidable women, each shaped by pain, but driven by entirely different philosophies of survival and power. With all these possibilities and emotional ripple effects, one thing becomes unmistakably clear: Erica's return to daytime television would never be a footnote or narrative filler. She would not arrive merely to prop up a larger storyline or lend fleeting gravitas to a passing arc. Her entrance, whether as the revered Viki or a wholly reimagined character, would be central, catalytic, and thematically transformative. Her character would ignite buried tensions, resurrect forgotten betrayals, and demand answers to long-avoided questions. In a town like Port Charles, where trust is often transactional, where history is rewritten in whispers, and where reputations frequently outrun truth, Erica would stand as a beacon of conscience, not perfect, but principled. Her wisdom, forged through decades of inner storms, would become the mirror through which characters are forced to confront their darkest selves. In an era of storylines that too often spiral toward chaos and spectacle, Erica would reintroduce a deeper, more timeless power, the strength of a woman who has nothing left to prove, and everything still to teach. Her return would not only reshape the characters around her, but perhaps, in the most meaningful ways, challenge Port Charles to rediscover its own soul.